we doing? IB Nation Sports Talk up and rolling on a Friday. Yes, that's right. On a Friday, DK, a live show on a Friday. This almost didn't happen. I was scrambling. I had to scramble the jets, put out the bat signal, called to places near and wide to figure out who was going to do the show with me today, because it's like, obviously the game got pushed back a day. Like the original plan was, okay, New Year's Day, Wednesday, they were going to play the game. Then we would do a show Thursday. And then today would have kind of been up in the air. But after the game got pushed back to Thursday, there was no way that we couldn't do some kind of show today. So glad to have you with us here today on a very exciting Friday, the day after Notre Dame's Sugar Bowl win over Georgia as the Fighting Irish in the Schneid, 3 decades. Hard to believe how long it had been since Notre Dame had won a bowl game like that last night. And they did it. Jesse's going to be along here in a little bit. Vince is going to do his part of the show from the airport in New Orleans. So he'll be along in a little bit as well. We were just getting ready. I was on the verge of hitting the live button when Jesse was having, shocker, some kind of internet issue in Cleveland. I think they just need to gut Cleveland and redo the infrastructure over there. But a lot of people excited in the chat early tonight. Michael Hahn said he rewatched the strip sack and the touchdown on the next play in the kickoff return to start the second half about 500 times. I wish I could have rewatched it at least once. I did not realize until after the game was over last night that I forgot to freaking hit record and record the game. So I'm going to have to see if I can find it someplace else so I can rewatch and do some different stuff like that. There's Jesse. Is Cleveland Internet cooperating now?
I think so. I hope so.
I don't know. I just got a frozen frame there a second ago. So I guess we'll find out. USMA 87 says Vince needs to be wearing his beads. I guess we will see when we check in with Vince from the New Orleans airport. Chuck is right. Chuck just spoiled it for all of us. Vince and his wife Kristen got to the airport, and Vince, we've already recorded his part of the show from the New Orleans airport. So that'll be coming up in a little bit. That's what it took to make this show come together today. Jesse's on a little bit of a time constraint today as well. So we're just going to roll right into questions. If you're good with that, are you ready to go?
I'm ready. I've already held this thing up long enough.
Fill in the blank. Notre Dame Sugar Bowl win over Georgia is blank.
Notre Dame Sugar Bowl win over Georgia is the greatest Notre Dame victory of my lifetime. 29 years. This is the most important, most significant, biggest win, whatever you want to call it, in my 29 years of existence. They've never won a national championship. They've never won a New Year's Six bowl game. They took down the SEC champion. They are now a New Year's Six bowl champion. They're a Sugar Bowl champion. But obviously the job isn't finished. I'm not happy with just a Final Four appearance. But if the question is, what is this victory? It's the best victory of my lifetime, and I have no doubts about that one.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about it because you are 28. So I mean, obviously, if
basically
you're young,
29.
If you're
in terms
young,
of football seasons.
Well, yeah, I guess so. But I mean, if you're younger than, like if you just want to use the 31 years, if you are really probably younger than, like 35 or younger, like you don't have much of a memory of anything that happened in 1993 or, winning the Cotton Bowl against Texas A&M or any of that. And, like Vince is barely old enough to have recollections of 1988 beating Miami in the national championship and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, this is a big narrative ender that Notre Dame, can't win big games. They just beat a Goliath from the big bad SEC, and you've probably been watching stuff all day. If you tuned into the SEC network or Feinbaum or whatever, well, good luck to you. if you're a Notre Dame fan. The supposedly invincible SEC, 31 years is a lot of lopsided, high-profile bowl games where Notre Dame, couldn't compete. All of that is gone now. For me personally, and I mean, you obviously came along with me, but I moved here 24 years ago to cover Notre Dame football and obviously to do play-by-play for some other Notre Dame sports as well. But a big chunk of the job was obviously covering Notre Dame football. And 24 years ago, I thought about this when you think about the 31 years. 24 years ago, moving here was only 7 years removed from that last major bowl win, in the Cotton Bowl. So, it didn't seem that unrealistic at all at that point, or like that we would be waiting this long, but we had this long running Sisyphean churn of one good year, one bad year, have a really good year, get blown out in big bowl games and all that. It was just a repeating cycle. But 24 years ago, Pete Carroll hadn't even been hired yet at USC. So think of the rise and fall of the USC dynasty under Pete Carroll, for that matter. All happened in that 24-year span. Nick Saban was just a pretty good coach at Michigan State who had just gotten hired at LSU. Urban Meyer, when I moved here, was still on the Notre Dame staff as the wide receivers coach under Bob Davie. He was finishing his tenure there and then moved on, got the job at Bowling Green. Within a couple of years, he gets the job at Utah, and then, obviously his career takes off. I could go on and on, Tom Brady, Bill Belichick. Nobody knew who Charlie Weiss even was at that point. So, yeah, I mean, it took a long time to get here, but these are the kind of games that you come here to Notre Dame, if you're working in the media like me, to cover. And obviously, as a fan, everyone has been waiting for. I mean, did it feel like a huge weight had been lifted, Jess, as you were watching that last night?
Yeah, because after the game ended, I just sat there and didn't know what to do with myself, because I was like, I don't know what this experience is like, to be honest with you. Notre Dame to win a monumental game. And I was telling that to one of my coworkers today, just the entire second half. I obviously had optimism that Notre Dame was going to do the thing, but I just kept reverting back to the Ohio State game, and I was like, something's about to happen. They're going to do something here to mess this up. You know what I mean? That's kind
because you had PTSD, right?
Right. And so I was just sitting there waiting for something bad to ultimately happen. And when it did it, and Notre Dame just continuously proved itself to be the better team, I just kind of sat there in disbelief and shock almost, because again, it's not a moment or a situation that I've gotten to experience. And so after the game, I just kind of laid on the couch for 30 minutes and just took it all in, just soaked it all up. And yeah, it's just amazing feeling at the end of the day. I've never felt that Notre Dame has belonged more than I do right now. I mean, literally they went in and they beat the SEC powerhouse. We're not even talking about an SEC champion. We're talking about teams that have a team that has won national championships, a head coach that is very distinguished amongst his peers. And so, there's nothing to take away from this Georgia team at the end of the day. It's still a really good team. They have weapons all over offensively and defensively. And so don't let, anyone today kind of, talk you off the ledge, because the same people were picking Georgia to win. So
that's right.
You can't have it both ways today.
No, that's exactly right. Just like we said a week ago, that the same people, I guess it's been a little bit more than a week ago, but the same people who were, Indiana didn't belong in the playoff and all that, they were the same people who were picking Indiana and the other teams, for upsets in the first round of the playoffs. So don't listen to any of that, because everyone's gonna change their argument, to fit the situation just as quickly as the hat drops. So it's huge, and whatever anyone says, Notre Dame went to the big stage and they finally won one of these things. And that's it's still kind of a starting point because of where you are now in the college football playoffs, but it was a huge shift for Notre Dame. And there's still going to be, every step of the way, I have no doubt that there are going to be people picking against them, because, let's be honest, that's the way it goes, right? Not everyone's going to pick, the same team, whether it's Notre Dame or anybody else. But, look, Vince and I had this conversation. We were talking about it in the press box up there watching Notre Dame in Indiana. I really wish that Alabama had made the playoff and it was Alabama at Notre Dame Stadium instead of Indiana. Because, like, because I do think Notre Dame would have won that game relatively easily because Alabama was obviously completely overhyped. But, like, could you imagine now if Notre Dame had beaten Alabama and Georgia in back-to-back weeks of the college football playoff? I mean, that would have just been epic. It's good enough beating Georgia, but would have been really nice to have that little back-to-back with those two.
I still can't believe that game was 2 weeks ago.
I can't either. 2 weeks ago today, as a matter of fact. So all four teams that played in the first round of the playoffs won their quarterfinal games this weekend to advance into the semifinals. Marcus Freeman was asked after beating Georgia if it was an advantage to play in the first round. Here is his answer.
No, I don't. I think whatever circumstances you're given, you make the most of them. And if we would have had a first round bye, I would have been the first one to say, hey, this is great for us. We didn't. It's great for us. We are always a glass half full group, and whatever circumstance are thrown at us, we're going to take advantage of it and prepare and maximize the opportunity ahead of us. And so that's what they did. The first game had nothing to do with this game. It was the preparation that they put into this week in this game and the performance that they put on. But I don't believe in my heart the first game had anything to do with this one. It was about the preparation they did after the first game.
All right. So Freeman says wasn't an advantage. What do you think, Jess?
Yeah, I tend to agree with Marcus Freeman. I think it is all about how you spin it and the mindset that you get into. And his approach is always going to be glass half full. And so, I liked his response in basically saying no matter what situation we were going to be put in, I was going to spin it that it was the most advantageous to, our team essentially at the end of the day. So I can't agree more with what he's saying because and Nick Saban, it's funny because you texted me before the game and Nick Saban picked all these other teams to win because of this rationale, and then he doubles back and he picks Georgia to win it, even though he's saying that the teams that had more time off are at a disadvantage, but for some reason that would be an advantage to Georgia. And the reason why, I think it's a disadvantage to be off for so much time is you just kind of forget what it's like to lean on someone else, to physically hit and go up against someone else. Notre Dame's just a little bit fresher. They might have some nagging, lingering injuries, but that gets taken care of once the game starts. Adrenaline kicks in. All those things will take care of itself. And so, Notre Dame, in my opinion, had the advantage because they were more mentally locked in longer than what Georgia was. And they were, they played another team. They surpassed that goal, and then they moved on to the next one. And so the ability to hit someone else, to lean on someone else, to do those sort of things, I think that's always going to be, an advantage. And I think the same rationale for the NFL. It stinks that, a lot of these teams that are the number one seed, they take, like the Chiefs, they're probably going to rest all of their guys this weekend, and they're going to get a bye. So they're almost going to go three full weeks without playing, a meaningful football game. And so I think there's a lot to be said. And I think the real reason this benefits Notre Dame is because of their lack of experience in the big game, right? And so I think it gives Notre Dame something to kind of move on to and refocus on. But when you're just sitting there lingering and thinking about the same thing for 2 to 3 weeks, I think you could just become, at a mental disadvantage. So I like the route Notre Dame took. And again, I think no matter what, Marcus Freeman was always going to spin it as it was going to be advantageous.
And that's exactly what I was going to say.
And that's the bigger point in my opinion.
Exactly. That's the more important thing, is that Marcus Freeman was going to frame it no matter how it, look back to the start of the season, or even before the start of the season. Look back to July when they went to New York and did their ESPN blitz. Remember that? When everyone was talking about, Notre Dame, if they make it, they're not going to be able to get a bye. And then Marcus Freeman, he got asked that multiple times on the ESPN platforms because he was on all these different shows. And he was like, we don't get a bye during conference weekend, or we don't get a bye in the first round of the playoffs, but our bye is we don't have to play in that conference championship weekend. We get that time off, so he was already spinning that as their advantage. And, I think a lot of people kind of came around to that. To me, when you look at it now, I mean, this is a fair point a couple people made, including Josh. Obviously, like in this very specific instance, Riley Mills wouldn't have been hurt if Notre Dame had had a first round bye. And that is, I mean, that's huge, both for the team and for Riley Mills. You can't get around that you lost a player due to injury, unfortunately, because of the fact that they were playing. But like bigger picture, the fact that all four of the teams that played in the first round all beat the teams that had the byes, Ohio State, Notre Dame, Penn State, Texas. But those four teams, along with Oregon, because no one was going to argue that Oregon shouldn't have been number one, like the number one seed going into the playoffs. They won the Big Ten championship. They were the only undefeated team remaining. But the four teams that are still playing, had an extra game because of the seeding that the system gives, them, because of the byes go to the four highest rated conference champions. So like, to me, four of the top five teams were playing in the first round. Like, that's why these teams won, not just because, like you can definitely argue that they built a little bit of momentum. And I definitely thought, like, especially when Notre Dame was on defense on the very first possession of the game that Georgia had the football, like Notre Dame's defensive front was just smacking Georgia's around. So like the physicality, speed of the game, all that stuff, that was probably a factor, because then Georgia bounced back and they were definitely pushing back and won some battles as it played on. But for me, it's not just because they played an extra game, it's because these were definitely four of the top five teams in the country that had to play those first round games, and that's ultimately why they're all still standing now at the Final Four in the semifinals. So one of the plays of the game was Freeman's call to send out the punt team onto the field on 4th and 1 at their own 18-yard line, and then run the offense on. And then ultimately the decision, to, they drew Georgia offside. So Marcus Freeman, after the game last night, talked a little bit about it, and wait for it, you'll hear somebody else chime in as well.
Yeah, it's Jack, it's a mentality. That situation that happened in the fourth quarter was something we practiced, and I think the performance is a reflection of that. We had a lot of confidence in the ability to be able to do that, and we had a plan, and that's the aggressiveness in terms of our preparation that I want our program to have, and again, out there when it matters the most. And so that's got to be one of our edges, right, is that we are going to be an aggressive group and not fear making mistakes, not fear, hey, it didn't go your way. We went for it on 4th and 1. We didn't execute. Okay, here we go, defense, and they got to stop. And so that's how I want this group to attack our preparation and attack performance when we have the opportunity.
Real quick, he's being humble. That was completely his play, and we were going to do it a different way, like 2 days ago. And then he flipped it, and we executed it that way, and it worked.
It's our
so
play.
He's being humble, like all throughout the year. All right, yeah, you know this guy, but I'll say it for him. Great call, great execution.
All right, so Jess, that little surprise there. Flashing forward into the future. First, rate that exchange between Freeman and Riley Leonard there last night.
Yeah, that's a 10 out of a 10 exchange.
Perfect.
Nothing like Riley Leonard chiming in and say, you know what, give this man his flowers at the end of the day, because it was Marcus Freeman. And, really what we've learned is throughout the entire season, all of these punt team, trick plays were Marcus Freeman. And so it's contagious because, like he said, it is, like Marcus Freeman said, we are going to prepare to win the game. We're not, it's not enough just to show up and kind of go through the motions. Like if Notre Dame is going to be here, they're going to go out there and try to win the game and do everything they can to win. And that means, aggressive play calling, fake punts, going for it on 4th down, all of that stuff. And it's just so refreshing, because look at how Notre Dame executed last night. They returned a kickoff for a touchdown. They ran that trick play on the punt team. 10 years ago in this same sort of game, Notre Dame didn't do any of that sort of stuff. They had no edge in special teams because they had a coach who believed that special teams should basically just
don't be a liability. Don't worry about being an asset. Just don't be a liability. Which, I mean, that was the hole that he had to dig himself out of because he let it become a liability and he had to get it back to, just being a break-even proposition. But difference makers across the board. Absolutely right. But coming down to preparation, and as Riley Leonard said, they were going to do it a little bit differently, but just the fact that they had that practice, they had prepared for that moment, they were ready to go with that. And it was the exchange itself, getting back to that. I loved it. Riley Leonard kind of, giving it back and Marcus Freeman staying, in the humble mode and that whole thing. Riley Leonard's like, okay, yeah, but it was you. Okay. It was you. What were you thinking when that was going on? Okay. They run the offense back on and it's like, that's excitement enough, cause they're showing behind the punter and then all of a sudden you see, everybody run off and is like, what is this, a swinging gate punt? What's going on here? And then they pan out and you see the punt team running off, the offense coming on, the play clock is winding down. What are you thinking as that clock is ticking down in that moment?
Yeah, so as the clock is ticking down, I didn't think Notre Dame was actually going to run a play, but there's no harm in doing what they did because if it goes down and hits 0, then you just back it up 5 yards and you punt the ball, basically back 5 more yards. I didn't think they'd actually run a play, and I didn't think Georgia was going to be stupid enough to jump off sides, but I mean, that's ultimately what happened. I mean, the whole point of that situation was to get a penalty. They weren't trying to run a play. They were trying to be fast enough and shuffle enough that I think one of two things. They either get Georgia trapped with too many guys on the field, or 2, they get Georgia trapped in an offsides. It was going to get – the whole goal was to draw some sort of penalty.
Absolutely.
They were never going to run a play in that situation.
No, and that's what that's what I thought. But then the clock keeps winding down, and it's winding down, and my adrenaline is like, what? I'm like, as the clock keeps going down, I'm like, surely he's not going to burn a timeout here, just for the sake of pulling a stunt. I'm like, is he actually going to run a play? It was kind of like the Seinfeld episode when they went to the car dealership and Kramer and the guy from the dealership are, out on the highway and they're like seeing how close to empty they can get the gas, down to empty. It's like, how far can they take this thing? And I didn't think that there was any way that they were going to snap it. And you're right. I mean, they didn't want to, but as soon as the guy jumped, you've got a free play and you do it. But that was like as much buzz and adrenaline as I can remember on any play in a long time with that winding down. Cause it got down to 2, I think. I think the play clock got to 2 before they finally snapped it. So was that the play of the game, or do you give it to something else?
I'm actually I'm going to kind of go through some rationale real quick here. Notre Dame winning the coin toss was, in my opinion, the very first important play of the game because I didn't want Notre Dame to start on an offense. I knew that their defense would give them a better chance of settling into the game, and that's exactly what they did. But my biggest play has to be a Don Schuler getting that fumble because not only to me, I think it sent a message that Notre Dame was here to play, and they were there was no advantage basically at that point anymore. And 2, it stole points away from Georgia very early. That could have been a touchdown or a field goal at minimum. And so, or that might have been 4th down actually. But anyways, it stole points away from Georgia. In my opinion, it set the tone. It got you took the ball away inside the red zone and, they're inside your territory. I thought that was definitely the play of the game. And then to be honest with you, the strip sack at the end of the first half was also a play of the game. And so to me,
I mean, those are the choices. It's like the kickoff return, the Oben strip sack that sets up the touchdown, the Schuler fumble that you're talking about, those were all among the nominees. There were a lot of big plays that were made by Notre Dame. And that's a big difference in this kind of game as well. Kind of like you were alluding to, usually the big plays have gone the other way on this stage, but Notre Dame was in it to win it, and they made plays all night long. And that's why we've got so many different options for this. I do think it was the play. Again, like you can't go wrong with any of the plays that you just mentioned. I think it was the play of the game because of when it happened. Like all those others at the moment were definitely the play of the game to that point. But like Notre Dame used more than 7.5 minutes on that drive. And remember, they only got to midfield and they punted. They started off at their own 9-yard line and they're leading by 13 points. And there's like 9.5 minutes left to go in that game. That is a ton of time left in a 13-point game. So they chewed up more than 5 minutes on the clock after that play, just getting to midfield, and essentially sealed the win at that point when they punt after the 2-minute timeout. And, like beyond even that, like the purpose trying to get Smart to call the timeout, that, he wouldn't call the timeout, but it shows the detail and the preparation that they have, because, Smart was over there blowing a gasket because he thought it was an illegal play, but it wasn't an illegal play because the long snapper had never come set. And so that's why it was completely legal that Notre Dame was able to run things on and off the way they do. And I mean, again, like this is a coach who's won 2 national championships. He's only a year removed from winning the second of those national championships, but he got outcoached by Marcus Freeman last night across the board, hands down. There's no doubt about that. There's no one who can come out of that game and say that he didn't get outcoached by Marcus Freeman.
So the reason why I think Adon's hit was the play of the game for me is because it set the tone early. The 2 things. One, Notre Dame could play fast and physical in space, and also Notre Dame was going to pop you. Like they
Right.
weren't going to sit back and let Georgia take it to them. They brought the house on that 4th down. Adon Schuler came around the edge and he smacked him. And again, that was the difference all night. Notre Dame had players to play in space. They played fast, they played relentless, and they played physical. And I think that was all, set by Adon Schuler's hit on that play.
I don't disagree with that. Again, like there are plenty of options to choose from in this, and I don't think you can go wrong with either one. Okay, so you're on a time crunch. Vince is going to be on a time crunch. I want to get one last one in here because, like Josh is talking about 3rd and 7, and I think I've seen some other people bring it up as well, and that's what we're going to talk about real quick. Same drive. Riley Leonard converts 3rd and 7 with his 9-yard run that he finished by leaping over a Georgia defender.
Everybody keeps telling me stop doing that, and then I did it, and it worked out today. So,
Stop.
And plus we're in the playoffs, so it's like, all right, put your body on the line. But pretty much, like, that's my mindset going into every game. Like, everybody else going to put their body on the line. I'm going to do it right there with them. It was going to be a physical matchup. Our number one key to victory was to win the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball, and that's exactly what we did. We knew if we could, establish ourselves up front, we were going to have a chance at this thing. And, they're a very physical group. They brought a lot of pressure today, but I think we handled it pretty well. And, stay behind the chains early in the game, then kind of figured it out a little bit. I was struggling in the passing game, but shoot, that opens up the run game. We were able to utilize our abilities and execute when it mattered.
All right, so there you go, Riley Leonard laying it on the line. I think it's hard to find any Riley Leonard doubters at this point, don't you?
Yeah, and the thing is Riley, this game was always going to come down to, and this whole season is ultimately going to come down to plays like that for Riley Leonard. Can he make a play in the big spot? And again, I think so many people in the beginning of the season were so caught up about, his arm talent, his arm strength, all of those things. But you got to remember, and I think this play can prove it just as much as any other, if you need 7 or 8 yards, that doesn't mean Riley Leonard has to throw the ball. He can still find ways to escape the pocket. And I was telling you before the game started, I believe Mike Denbrock and Riley Leonard played down the quarterback runs all week because they knew it was going to be an integral part of this game. And ultimately, that's what it came down to. Had Riley Leonard not been able to run the ball, I don't think Notre Dame wins this game because they started moving they got their field goal after Georgia's field goal because Riley Leonard made a couple first downs with his legs. And then I saw a stat today, basically a havoc rate. Notre Dame's defensive line created more havoc because Stockton took sacks ultimately at the end of the day, and Riley Leonard only took one sack yesterday. Yeah. 1 sack. And so, everyone gets caught up with, his ability to run and all that stuff. But to me, the more important part is the man just doesn't take sacks. He doesn't allow negative plays to happen. They don't get behind the chains, and that's because of his running ability. He can always get out of the pocket and either throw the ball away or take, maybe a 1-yard loss or pick up a yard or two. But this game was ultimately going to be decided. Could Riley Leonard make enough plays? And he made plays with his feet, and obviously he did on that 3rd and 7 to seal the game.
And that's it. I wore my stats are for losers shirt because, who would have thought, and I know a lot of people didn't think this, because look, we keep hearing this stuff about, well, Notre Dame's not going to be able to win if Riley Leonard can't be a better passer. We heard it going into Indiana. All the Indiana people wanted to talk about was, well, all you got to do is stop the run. How'd that work out for you? And then, we heard it leading up to this game. There's no way they're going to be able to beat Georgia if Riley Leonard's not a better passer. It's about making winning plays. It doesn't matter how they happen. How about those runs between the tackles that Riley Leonard has? Did those count? The explosive runs that Riley Leonard had between the tackles, did those count? Those are winning plays. And then, okay, maybe it's easy when you get a strip sack and you get the ball at the 13-yard line, but then boom, he puts it on the dart. Yep. That's exactly right. A dart to Bo Collins. Collins makes the big catch, So, they won when he passed for just 90 yards, and again, there's already people talking about, well, he's going to have to throw better if they're going to beat Penn State. Okay. How about this? Stop looking at the stat lines. All right. Stop looking at the stat lines and just watch the way the guy plays, because that's what it's about. Again, they went out, they got this guy to win a national championship. And now here they are, 2 college football playoff wins later. They're in the semifinals. He makes winning plays, and that's all you need to know at this point.
I would say my only gripe with the whole game was offensively, and I said this against IU. I felt like Notre Dame had the advantage of pressing the outside or pressing the edge. I felt like they didn't do that enough in the run game, but I think that's something you can maybe learn for Penn State. But they won the game, and again, Notre Dame wins a game like this, there's no Notre Dame played bad or no criticism, but I thought that they could have pressed the edge a little bit more in the run game.
And that's something that Greg McElroy was talking about, and some other people I heard talking about leading up to this game as well. That you could beat Georgia on the perimeter by running outside. And we talked about it on whatever day's show that was. I think it was Tuesday's show. You can run outside on them. And the times they did try to run outside, they were able to hit some of those runs, but they didn't really stick with it. They kept trying to run between
jet sweep was nice, where he got out on the perimeter. But again, because of how much those defensive linemen are crashing and how hard those really good linebackers are filling for Georgia, you just kind of overcompensate and leave the edge open. And that's exactly how Notre Dame hit that run against IU. Is the edge was there. And Again, I don't know, maybe they didn't get the look that they liked and whatever, but they won the game. And I hope that they do more of that against Penn State. And, I think for some final thoughts here, and I know we'll get into this more next week, but Notre Dame played the best defense that they're going to face all season. I think that you can definitely open it up more against Penn State. And I think Penn State's going to struggle with the best defense that they've played all season as well.
Yeah, Penn State's going to have a good defensive line. That's what they're about. But I think that there are going to be a lot of plays to be made all over the field. Penn State was as explosive as they have probably looked all season especially against good opponents. They were not nearly that, as explosive against Ohio State. And that's ultimately why Ohio State beat Penn State during the regular season. They were much more explosive against a group of 5 opponent, a good group of 5 opponent, but one that was obviously very reliant on their best player. And ND Saylor, I agree with this wholeheartedly. I know Jesse's got to get going, but I think Greg McElroy, in terms of the broadcast last night, that was the best broadcast that I've heard from Greg McElroy. You could tell that he was prepared. He had studied a lot of film. He knew a lot of, tendencies for both teams. He was on point all night long. I thought it was a great broadcast. And then Sean McDonough did well also, but I thought it was a great broadcast from an analyst standpoint by Greg McElroy last night. All right, Jess, appreciate you coming on. You stayed a little bit longer than you said you were going to, but thanks for helping us have a show tonight.
I'll see you guys next week.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, so a lot of good stuff. We got even more. David, I completely agree with what you're saying. It's just amazing watching a Don Schuler right now. Just keeps getting better, it seems like, every week. Andrew, I agree with this as well. The Georgia kid, man, Jones, the walk-on, like the fact that they kept showing him, like ESPN, it's like, come on, man. It's like, it's obvious this kid is a walk-on. You really got to keep harping on that. And Trevor Trowbridge, if you haven't seen his tweet about that, he listed off about 8 different bullet points, maybe 10 different bullet points, like sideline interference didn't cause, Georgia to be this bad on third down and all these other factors. And that is exactly right. Like the sideline interference did not lose the game for Georgia. Was it an important play? Yeah, but it was early in the game. There was still plenty of time to overcome any of that kind of stuff. But yeah, they really heaped it on him, pretty hard, it seems like. Steven says he wasn't a fan of McElroy. The emotions were riding pretty high, and it's going to happen. But again, I just felt like he made a lot of, he was on top of things throughout the entire broadcast. And like if you're watching that and you're revved up and you're souped up, probably any little thing that any of those guys say are probably going to strike you wrong. But like if you got it recorded and you go back and watch some of it, I thought that McElroy was really on point throughout the whole broadcast. All right. So Vince DeDario was in New Orleans last night. He's been there the last few days covering the game for Irish Breakdown. And a little bit ago, before he got on the plane to head from New Orleans to Charlotte and then Charlotte back to South Bend, he jumped on with me for the second part of our show tonight. I basically kind of, set this up as extended rapid fire type show, even though I didn't, necessarily call it all rapid fire. But here we are, rapid fire style. Vince from the airport in New Orleans. We don't even have time, for like back drama. We'll get all the fun stuff, the fun stories, hopefully on Monday. I'm going to jump right into topics with you though, because they're probably going to call you to board, and I don't, stats. I'm wasting more time right now than it's even worth. So
who knows?
Do you buy or sell January 2nd, 2025 as the day BK PTSD officially died?
I tell you what, I think, of course, there's an announcement going on right when you ask me the question, but I think you have to say yes to this. I think I'm going to buy it. There's a couple of reasons. First of all, we're in Louisiana, which is it is.
I didn't even think about that. You're like right up the road, right down the road.
Yeah, it is poetic that they get this win. The impossible win, by the way. The impossible. We're told it was impossible. They get the impossible win in Louisiana, right down the road from where he currently resides. And definitely ran into my fair share of LSU fans down here as well. And I bit my tongue for the most part. But I had a tour guide who was an LSU graduate. And he's like, he starts talking about football. And I'm like, no. And then he goes, oh, no. He's like, oh no, we're gonna be good, next year. We'll get our quarterback back. And I look him square in the eye and I go, you still got Brian Kelly. And he starts laughing. and he's like, I knew you were gonna say that. I was like, I couldn't help it. I couldn't. And there was some Georgia fans right next to me. They started laughing, and it was fantastic. But to the question, yes, I think they actually have exercised that beast. Finally, you and I had this conversation about, is the monkey off the back of Notre Dame, the bowl win, and all that? Obviously,
there's no doubting it now. There's no doubting it. It's gone.
Zero.
Like
gone.
I made the argument less than a week ago that after beating Indiana, it should be gone. I mean, you made good points, even though this is the postseason.
Hey, I get it
because I didn't even think about this at the time, but watching some of these other lower tiered bowls, and you think about the playoff teams are really the only teams that are at full strength right now.
That's true.
So even
none of these
Indiana
other bowls,
last week.
These other bowls, like it's like, oh,
That's right.
Michigan beat Alabama and all this. Yeah, okay, got it. But like, it's not the same teams.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly. But the playoff teams, it is. So even Notre Dame, Indiana, both teams were at full strength. There was no excuse on either side. But now, I mean, it was in a bowl game. It was on a neutral site. It was like a top 5 team. It was Georgia. All these demons gone. All these no-shows. And, and I know Brian Driscoll, said this a little bit on his show, and I've said it before. You do still have to give Brian Kelly credit, whatever you think
100%.
about him now, for rebuilding the program and giving it consistency. But it still took the handoff essentially to Marcus Freeman and, Kelly fleeing into the night to head down there to Baton Rouge. It still took that for this program to go to the next level. It had to be Marcus Freeman who was going to take this program to the next level. So those demons are exercised. And I didn't even think about the fact that if BK was going to turn on the 10 o'clock news last night and, get the lead story, Notre Dame beats Georgia, and he's like, he's flinging the remote at the, from his bedroom. And
I mean, it's fantastic that we're right down here in the boot, and he's just right up the road, man. Like it's poetic justice, man. I'm telling you.
I think so.
They could have done it in a better spot.
Beautiful. It is beautiful. Okay, fill in the blank. You were, of course, in New Orleans in the Superdome last night. The thing that stood out most to you from Notre Dame's win over Georgia was blank.
Well, look, they were the underdog. I don't care what Vegas says or anything like that. I mean, it was a 2-to-1 ratio, Georgia to Notre Dame fans, and that might be generous. As far
that was
as
obvious on TV.
Was it? Okay, I was going to ask.
I thought it was anyway. Yeah. Like the way the cheers were and the boos and whatever else.
It was the loudest I've ever heard when Notre Dame had the football. The absolute loudest. So they had to overcome a lot. Even walking around town in the hotel, it might have been 5-to-1. It's what it felt like. And then obviously you get to the venue, and it was probably 2-to-1, I would say. But it was incredibly loud. It was an open air press box. So we're basically sitting in the stands. It was so loud when Notre Dame had the football, and they overcame all that. I mean, they overcame everything. Nobody thought that they were going to win. You know what I mean? And so they overcame all of it. Just the crowd. Obviously, as the game wore on, Notre Dame fans got a little bit louder and Georgia fans got a little bit, quieter and that sort of thing. But it was a definite underdog on the road atmosphere throughout until the very end when the trophy presentation was taking place. Like, that's the only time, because then obviously
all that red was filtering out of the Superdome, and the 20% that was left in green and blue and gold and whatever else, I assume. Yeah,
correct. Yes, mostly green. But yeah, it was.
And there's Brian Kelly over there in the corner.
I wish. That would have been great. I'd have walked right up to him, shook his hand, said, "Thanks, buddy. Thanks for laying the foundation."
Well, I mean, obviously, I didn't get a chance to be in the building to experience all that stuff firsthand. So what stood out to me just watching the game on TV, I think the most, I mean, it's not like we weren't predicting it, because we were, but just the physicality that Notre Dame played with against a team that is kind of big, like Georgia and Alabama over the last, decade plus have sort of become the standard bearers, for what you think of when you think of speed and athleticism and physicality at the line of scrimmage and, all those different things. And we felt like Notre Dame matched up with this kind of team better than, any of those Brian Kelly teams that had been in the playoffs or in the BCS championship game. And like from the get-go, Georgia has the ball first, and Notre Dame's defensive line was just pushing Georgia's offensive line around that first series, especially. Now, as you would expect, Georgia responded. They won some battles. Notre Dame won some battles the rest of the way, and like Georgia won some downfield shots, but Notre Dame was able to, Notre Dame was obviously able to make explosive plays of their own. Jaden Harrison and, Riley Leonard with some of his runs and things like that. The running backs never really got off the ground, but Riley Leonard was able to make up for that with some of his own play. So that was just what stood out to me, was from a pure physical standpoint, Notre Dame was every bit the match of what's been one of the best programs in the nation over the last 6 or 7 years.
walking on the field before the game started, during warm-ups and all that, and I was walking over by the Tims, O'Malley and Priester, and we were watching Georgia kind of warm up. And what really stood out from a Georgia perspective, from their offensive line, was I was expecting in person just like girth. You know what I mean? Just big, like just girth. You know what I mean? Width. What they did not have that, by the way, the offensive line, in my opinion, in person. What they did have, though, was height and length. It just like long arms, height. They were just very long.
When Notre Dame hosted Georgia in 2017, I remember like being down on the field after the game and, teams, singing their alma maters and all that kind of stuff. There was an offensive lineman who, I was kind of in one corner of the field. He starts running it like towards me. And this was one of the biggest humans that I've ever seen, like fitting the description of what you're talking about. Just huge, not just completely girth massive, but like that, like that long and tall with, obviously some physical, muscular stature to go along with it. That's something that it seems like they have always had under Kirby Smart anyway.
And I think what I took from that in pregame was that they're not as wide, so Notre Dame's speed defensively could get around it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Or they were going to use their length and keep Notre Dame at bay. Like those are the two options. You know what I mean? And I think Notre Dame did a good job of using their speed against Georgia's length, as opposed to it wasn't just a big wall that they couldn't get around. You know what I mean? They were a little bit skinnier, but they were taller and longer. The hand fighting, the hand play went to Notre Dame in this one.
Definitely seemed like it with some of the plays that Notre Dame was obviously able to make in the backfield. And we'll touch on at least one of those here, a couple of those. So you asked Xavier Watts after the game about the message that it sends to the team, having a coach who's willing to go for it on fourth down deep in their own territory. And of course, that being 4th and 1 when the punt team is on and then it's off and here comes the offense. You're at your own 18-yard line. Here is Xavier Watts' response to that.
Yeah, I mean, just having a coach and a coaching staff that, like you said, that aggressive mindset kind of just gives us the confidence that, all right, these guys are all in. We need to be all in on the play call too. So, when they go out there and like we need to go on 4th down and they want to be aggressive, you need to go all in, make sure you do your job and get it done. So, I mean, it's just so refreshing to have coaches like that.
So, Vince, fabulous question, by the way. Marcus Freeman is blank.
Marcus Freeman is the coach that Notre Dame needs. I mean, that's a bottom line, right? I mean, he is who this team needs. He is who we as fans need. As media members, it's what we need. I mean, he is who they need, and he is coaching like his maturation process from getting the job until now is I mean, he has gained so much confidence as a head coach, and he has so much confidence in his players. It's so obvious. It
just feels like I was thinking about this last night, like watching the press conference, looking at some of the gutsy calls that, like that was like, you talk about stones of steel, man, like we were handed out No-Nads awards to Pat Narduzzi and Kurt Signetti last week. I mean, this is like the Nads of Steel award, on that play, that specific play last night. But we've seen other calls like that. And Marcus Freeman, you talk about his maturation. He's gone from a coach that a lot of people, after Northern Illinois, week 2, wanted to run out of town. He's in over his head. He can't do it. This shows that. And like, as we've talked about over the course of this, he didn't hide from that. He didn't shy away from Northern Illinois. He only let it make him stronger and make his team stronger. And he's just gone like in the span of 3 months from that to a coach who did, still kind of show signs of maybe he's not completely sure of himself, to like, this is an elite college football coach right now. This is a full-born elite college football coach is what we've seen. And like, that play just exemplifies that, the guts to do that and to, have his team prepared to do that. It wasn't just a whim on a spur of a moment kind of thing.
I believe it was Kirby Smart in the post game he was asked about Marcus Freeman or something along those lines. He compared him to Dan Campbell of the Lions. And going for it on fourth down and all those
We've
different
talked about
things.
that on Rapid Fire before. Like, he's become the Dan Campbell of college football, I think.
Which, who would have guessed that in the first year or two that he was there? Not me. No. Like, he was always like, hey, let's just play good defense. Let's not take any chances. That was kind of his MO, and it was super frustrating. But that's who he was. And now he's just completely flipped the script.
He wasn't quoting Metallica and, cocking his hat all over the place like Dan Campbell. But, we still love Dan Campbell for, for those things too. But like, remember, Dan Campbell was also, he was a first-time head coach when he took that job in Detroit. So there were questions that he had to answer. And it didn't start off great for Dan Campbell. But, the tone that it sent, I think, by Dan Campbell and the Detroit Lions are the team in the NFL that goes for it the most on fourth down and converts the most on fourth down. And that's what Marcus Freeman is as well. And the special teams and the fakes, Dan Campbell does that stuff as well. Like, they use that stuff as a weapon. And I do think that, like, when you talk about your culture, the culture obviously starts with Freeman and his personality and trickles down through the staff that he's got, because they're a big part of that culture as well. But I think that just the message that it sends to your team, we are confident in you and we've prepared for this. We've prepared for this moment. The moment is not too big for us. It starts with the head coach, and it was just on full display last night in the biggest moments. So RJ Oben made one of the biggest plays of the night with a strip sack that Junior Tuialamaka recovered, allowing Riley Leonard to hit Bo Collins on the touchdown pass on the next play just before halftime. Here is Leonard on Oben, who, of course, came to Notre Dame from Duke, just like Riley Leonard this past offseason.
People don't understand how good of a person he is and how smart he is and how much of a hard worker he is, because he's a mellow guy. He's not going to say much. But if you're ever in the facility, like 5 hours post-practice, he's going to be somewhere doing something to get better. I mean, the consistency amongst this guy is insane, and I've been seeing it for 4 years now in my college career, and I'm grateful that he was able to, come with me to this place. But this is a very mature guy we're talking about, and somebody who's not going to say a word whether things are going good or bad. He's going to put his head down and work. And that's kind of the MO of our season. I heard a quote last week, Henry Ford, whether you think you can or you can't do something, you're right. And RJ believed in himself all season, and it's finally starting to pay off for him.
Starts with confidence, and that's a big thing. And I think a lot of young people sometimes don't fully grasp that it starts not just with your physical traits, but what's between the ears as well. That was Oben's first sack of the season, Vince, which was amazing when I went back and I was writing some stuff up and putting some stuff together on that. Does that make up for essentially the fact that it has been a bit of a quiet season for RJ in his 60th season of college football?
Yep.
All right, next question.
He saved it for the biggest moment, right? We talked about Bo Collins, and I said this is what he was brought in for. He's going to make a play in this game, and it may be one play, and that's fine. He's going to make a play. Well, he caught the only touchdown, scored on by the offense, right? That's right. So he made his play. That's what he needed to do. That whole sequence, field goal by Mitch Jeter, transfer. Strip sack by Oben, transfer. Touchdown,
Riley Leonard,
pass and catch, transfer. And then kickoff return touchdown, transfer. Those guys, every one of them paid off in that moment, in that 54 seconds of playing time or whatever it was. That 17-point swing in that game was huge. And they were all transfers, primarily. Obviously, it takes 11, but they were all primarily transfers that did that. I mean, if that's not vindication for the guys that you brought in, I don't know what is.
And, you talk about roster building, and as Marcus Freeman has said, they're not going to major in the transfer portal, but, they're going to use it essentially like free agency. You go out and you fill key spots. I mean, Jordan Clark has been a big part of this team all season, on the defense, especially as thin as that secondary has gotten at times, when you lose a guy like Benjamin Morrison, obviously, and you had Jaden Mickey transfer, not even in the middle of the season, before even the season was halfway through. But absolutely for me with RJ Oben, because you were brought here to help this team win a national championship, because every year that's the goal at Notre Dame. And making that play got them one step closer to that goal last night. And, again, like with all the ups and downs and the injuries that have happened on that defensive line, he might not have played, quite to the elite level that maybe, people thought that he was going to play out coming in. But, again, when the stakes were the biggest, he went out there and he made the biggest play of his career. So awesome.
Yep. Could not agree more.
How close are you? Like, do you need to get going? Are you good for another question or two, or what do you think?
I think they call Group 2. We're Group 8.
Okay. Oh,
like
wow.
boarding. So we're
Group
okay.
Yeah. I might slip some more questions in here before it's all said and done.
It's very crowded flight, I can tell you that.
All right. Is that a baby stroller that's sitting next to you, by the way, or what is that? Okay. All right.
It's, luggage with bags on top.
Gotcha. Okay, so here's how Riley Leonard said he was able to refocus after having the game postponed for a day after the Bourbon Street tragedy.
Obviously, the events that occurred were very challenging, and I just want everybody to know that the Notre Dame family, every single person in our locker room, is praying for those families that are out there. I also want to thank the New Orleans Police Department for responding the way they did and creating a safe environment for us to play today so quickly after the events. But as a player and as a Notre Dame player, you recruit the right people for a reason. And I think adding another day is just helping our superpower out. We say our superpowers all the time. Our preparation and the character in our locker room, those are two intangible things that we have that we utilize. So to have an extra day, after we got done praying for all the families, I hit up my quarterback coach and said, all right, can we watch some film tonight? Like, I watched a whole, I got 4 or 5 more hours of film study. We had another day of walkthrough. That's our superpower, our preparation, and I think it definitely paid off today.
Preparation is the superpower. That was really interesting to hear him say that. And I'm curious, like, Vince, when you're sitting there in that press conference room and you're hearing Riley Leonard talking about superpowers, like, what are you thinking when he's saying all this?
I'm always fascinated by what Coach Freeman comes up with. Choose hard and your superpower and the gold standard, like all of these different things. I don't know if he's just an avid reader, like where he comes up with it, if he's just like, these kids are obviously buying into whatever he's selling. And it doesn't matter how corny it is. It doesn't matter any of that. If they're buying into it, that's what matters.
Right.
And they're completely bought into what he's doing. And whether you call it a superpower or whether you call it an advantage or whatever, doesn't matter. It's an advantage, and they buy into that it's an advantage.
Right.
Right. And when he was talking earlier, Marcus Freeman made a quote about, they asked him about, did playing last week, is that an advantage or whatever? He's like, whatever they throw at us, that's our advantage. Like, we're a glasses half full team. Everything's our advantage. That's the way we look at it. And they're bought in, and it shows.
And it's not just window dressing. He's not just like throwing quotes and clips and, all that stuff out there. They're obviously living it every day. And like hearing the quarterback, who obviously is such a huge part of this, to be voted a captain by his team, by his peers, and his only year on the team, to hear him talking about that preparation is superpower and all these different things that Riley Leonard's, you're absolutely right. They're obviously completely bought in. And Jesse and I earlier in the show, we played the clip with the little back and forth where Riley Leonard is like, he's just being modest, and he's like calling him out.
The best. That was the best. I've watched that. I saw it live, obviously, but I've watched that clip numerous times, and I laughed out loud when he started saying that. So I don't know if you can even hear that distinctive laugh, but like I thought that was hilarious.
I think I did. There was definitely some chuckling you could hear in the room.
But but it's genuine. Like he's kind of the all shucks, corny, whatever. Like I get it, but like it's genuine, and I think every player on that tem, whether they think he's corny or not, they also buy into Riley Leonard and that he's genuine and that he has all of their best interests at heart.
Well, that's the thing. Like Riley Leonard is part of the superpower too. Like the aura, the presence that Riley Leonard has that we keep talking about. That's like, forget about the stats. Stats are for losers. Follow the guy who's going to lead you to the end zone. Follow the guy who's going to lead you to the win. That's what it's all about.
Like, he had under 100 yards passing.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's what everybody is going to hold on to for the next 7 days before the next game, or however many days it is.
They keep wanting they keep wanting to bring that up. Like, every step of the way, they keep winning.
Right.
And after every win, they keep saying, well, he's going to have to pass better if they're going to beat this team.
Like, well, Drew Aller has the advantage because he could throw the ball all over the yard.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Keep thinking that. That's awesome.
And he could do that. And he could do that against Boise State. You know,
right?
Like, no slide on Boise State. But the path, you know, the team that Notre Dame just played is much better than Boise State. And that's like, Penn State has not looked more explosive all season than they looked against Boise State.
Correct.
Like, that's where they ran into trouble against Ohio State, was they lacked explosiveness. It's going to look a lot different when they play this Notre Dame defense.
That's exactly correct. And Kirby Smart said it. He's like, this is one of the best defenses we played all season. He's like, it's different when you're playing a defense like this.
That's right. That's right. And fill in the blank. Donovan Heinisch finishing off the game by sacking Gunnar Stockton is blank.
It was the perfect ending to a perfect night, is what it was. And I'm sitting there and I'm watching the game, Sean, and I'm starting to get, like, during that series, I'm getting giddy. Like, I'm starting to get giddy. It's under 2 minutes. They got it's a 2-possession game. Like, I'm starting to not be able to focus real well. I thought it was third.
I can't imagine that. I can't imagine what it was like to be sitting next to you in the press box. Were you still in the press box? Could you guys go down on the field? Okay.
I waited because I didn't want to miss anything. I waited until the game was over. But, like, I apologized to the guy sitting next to me after the game was over. I'm like, thanks for putting up with me during the game. But, like, I thought that was third down. I didn't even realize it was fourth down, to be perfectly honest with you. And then they're all coming off the field. I was like, it's over. This is great. Like, it was a perfect ending. It was an absolute perfect ending to that game.
No, you're exactly right. And I thought it was fitting because, you know, all the questions about the defensive line going into this game and, you know, Riley Mills obviously being out, that was significant. It was very significant. But then Howard Cross also gets hurt in the fourth quarter and he has to go out. So Donovan Heinisch is out there because Howard Cross had to leave the game. You know, so it's Heinisch and Gabe Rubio there at the end, you know, because so to me, it was just fitting that Heinisch was able to make that play with, you know, again, with all these question marks, all these injuries that this defensive line has sustained over the course of the season. It was to me just amazing, you know, again, against this one of the programs, as we've talked about, that's just churned out these great physical specimens on the offensive line, and it's Donovan Heinisch, one of the more undersized guys you're going to find, who goes out there and makes the sack to seal it off, and then they take a couple knees and that's it. So I thought it was pretty fitting that Heinisch was able to do that.
Just a wild way to finish that game. And you know, being at the game, I do want to say this: being at the game, Howard Cross never went to the tent. He just went back to the huddle with his helmet on. So I'm hoping, you know, for good things there. And then Jeremiah Love was on the elliptical bike towards the end of the game as well. So hoping that's a good sign. I don't know. Obviously, we're not going to know probably till we meet with Marcus Freeman tomorrow. But I was
going to say, well, we should find out something tomorrow.
I just wanted to put that out there as like an observer of what I saw.
Sure.
I feel fairly good. But then again, I felt good about Mills watching him in the IU game too. So I don't want to jump to any conclusions.
I mean, we obviously don't know. And like the press conferences are interesting because it seemed, you know, like they bring out the head coach and the two players, you know, and typically, you know, like after a Notre Dame home game, for example, we're going to get probably a good 15 minutes with Marcus Freeman exclusively. And then we get players after that for, you know, like 5 minutes or so a piece. When you're doing everybody in 20 minutes, you're going to get a lot fewer questions asked.
Well,
and obviously people didn't get to ask that kind of thing.
And they also had an open locker room at the same time.
True.
And they also had kind of an auxiliary press conference. So they had like a bunch of players in the auxiliary press conference, and then they had an open locker room, and then they had the head coach. So it's 3 different areas going on at the exact same time. So I was one person, so I went to the head coaches
No, I
conference,
know.
obviously.
It's
But
tough.
like it was, some of the other there was people all over the place. So it was kind of wild in that regard. But they weren't going to tell us anything about injuries anyway.
So I talked to Brian Driscoll, our boss, of course, today. Now, I don't want to put carts before horses, but if Notre Dame beats Penn State, gets to the national championship game, Brian, of course, is going to go down, I think, a little bit. He's going to the Orange Bowl this week, but he's also going to go to the national championship game, budgets and all that stuff. I've got a Notre Dame women's basketball game Sunday the 19th, but the national championship game is Monday the 20th. And, of course, that'll be a primetime kickoff. What are your thoughts about, it's not a short drive, but
is this the RV game?
Not necessarily RV, but two amigos cruising down the road for about 10 hours to get to Atlanta. Brian is in on, getting us credentials if we're willing to get in the car and drive.
They haven't won since I was 7 years old. So yeah, duh.
All right. We're in, because then I don't have another basketball game until Thursday.
Perfect.
So like Monday, then it's going to be a lot of driving. But
you know what?
I mean, when the Royals went to the World Series, I drove like 9.5 hours to get to Kansas City. Went to the game that night. Had a few adult beverages, while I was at the game with my buddy, but then got up the next morning and drove home all day.
Wow.
So, I mean, that's essentially what this would probably end up being. So,
wow. Yeah, it's a good call. Well, we'll figure it out. I'm not worried.
Maybe we stop somewhere along the way, find us a good Wi-Fi connection, do a show on the way back or something.
See, look at you.
If we had the RV, that would make it perfect, but we don't have that RV.
Calling around. And we start calling around.
So, I mean, anyone out there in the area who wants to, loan us an RV, we'll give you plenty of live reads.
And you could be the driver. Like whoever loans us the RV could be the driver.
There you go.
And I guarantee you, we could come up with a ticket in the stands.
They might be. I was going to say they might be mad if we left them in the parking lot.
Well, I think we could get them a ticket. I think we could probably work on that. Don't you think?
I think you're probably right. You're right.
Just saying.
All right.
Something we need to work on. So, all right, I think
so
it's about time.
All right. Well, it's just time. Thanks for doing this. I know that you're obviously at the airport and you're getting ready. So, safe travels going through Charlotte and then back to the Bend, right?
Back to the Bend tonight.
All right.
Yep.
All right. Safe travels, you and your wife. All right,
sir.
Sounds good.
See you later, buddy.
All right. He's Vince. I guess I cut it off there a little bit early, but of course, Vince is since in the air. I think he'll be landing in roughly 20 minutes or so in Charlotte if everything is still on time. Plenty of questions, comments popping up in the chat. Irish for Life 99 says, with all the super chats IB pulled in, I think there were almost 90 super chats in the post-game show last night. Amazing. They did a 5.5-hour show last night. That was crazy. He said we should be able to charter a plane, but then he says get a van and he'll be the IB driver. We're getting close here, Irish for Life. And then he said get me in the game and he'll find the RV. So stay tuned. Of course, they've got to beat Penn State first, but stay tuned, Irish for Life 99. I could be in on that. Tom says he's got a guy that could hook us up. All right. I know we're in on that as well. So, I mean, we could take a boatload of people in an RV for that matter. We could have, we could just do it upright. And like Irish for Life or Tom or whoever is driving, and Vince and I are doing a live show on the road as we go, assuming our internet connection stays. But that could be a really good IB popping time. Josh was asking if KVA, Kingston Viliamu Asa, even played. He did. He played 13 snaps, according to Pro Football Focus, 13 snaps. And I saw him. I distinctly remember seeing him later in the game as a pass rush guy off the edge. So he didn't play a ton, but he did get out there a little bit last night, 13 snaps. Michael, going back to some other comments, this Notre Dame team is the best since 1993. I don't think there is any disputing that. I mean, that's basically the last time Notre Dame had won, like a major bowl game. And obviously that's the year they finished number 2 in the polls to Florida State. Should have been at least a share of the national championship that year, but did not get it. But I there's no doubt in my mind. I mean, like, that was a national championship caliber team. This is a national championship caliber team. This team, no offense to the 2012 team, because they did get to the BCS national championship game. But as we've talked about, big disparity between just getting there and what happened in that game. So I agree, like across the board, pretty much across the board, this team is the best since 93. Johnny S. says, Ryan Clark roasting Cam Newton on First Take was priceless. I've not seen that yet. I think the video was posted on the Champions Lounge, and I've got it queued up and ready to go. So I'm going to watch that tonight and see what that was all about. Of course, Ryan Clark, Jordan Clark's dad, who's on ESPN, Get Up and First Take and all the other shows and all that kind of good stuff. Andrew says that he has been very critical of Freeman, but he has already surpassed Brian Kelly. No problem saying that. Did BK comment on Twitter X, about Notre Dame's win? He did not. I checked that, went back and looked, and BK said 0 about Notre Dame winning last night. No surprise, right? Like I was saying with Vince, I could just imagine Brian Kelly watching the news last night and throwing his remote control at the TV when it was all over with. So, good times. Well, again, we scrambled it together, and we managed to put a show together, and we will have one week from tonight as well, because Notre Dame will play in the college football playoff semifinal next Thursday. And one way or another, we are going to have a show the day afterwards on Friday as the Fighting Irish face off against Penn State in the Orange Bowl in one semifinal, and Ohio State and Texas in the other semifinal, with the winners, of course, moving on to the national championship game in Georgia on January 20th. Good stuff tonight. Everybody fired up, ready to go. Brian and Trevor, I believe, the last I heard anyway, have an Upon Further Review show coming up at 7 o'clock Eastern time tonight. So get set to check that out, and then plenty of other stuff. We've got all kinds of content coming up throughout the weekend and throughout the next week, leading up to next Thursday's Orange Bowl between Notre Dame and Penn State. Appreciate you being here tonight. Have a great weekend. I've got a Notre Dame women's basketball game on Sunday. I haven't seen Andre in the chat tonight, but he told me he was going to be out there in Chapel Hill. If you see me and you're at the game on Sunday, Notre Dame, North Carolina women's basketball game, stop by, say hi. And otherwise, we will talk to you on Monday on IB Nation Sports Talk.